joining us today for the third of 6 workshops this semester in Luther College's Growing Nonprofit Leaders series. I'm so grateful to live, work, and enjoy life in Treaty 4 territory on the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota First Nations, and the homeland of the Métis. And I have to admit, I'm on a bit of a high this morning from attending Luther College's Reimagining Nonprofits conference this weekend. I think there's a few people here today that were there. I hope you enjoyed the sessions as much as I did. If you were not able to attend, please think about going next year. Big congratulations to Colleen Strau and the conference organizing committee for putting together such an amazing conference. Anyhow, thanks again for joining me and Luther College's nonprofits communication students for another great workshop today. Before I turn things over to yet another amazing presenter, I just want to thank Luther College and the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation for sponsoring these professional development opportunities. I hope you'll join us again next week, Election Day in Saskatchewan, Monday, October 28th, same time, same place, 10 a.m. to 11:30 on Zoom for our next session when Victoria Flores from the Regina Open Door Society will share some ideas on how to elevate your social media presence. With no further ado, I am so excited to introduce you to Sabrina Cataldo. I first met Sabrina, gosh, Sabrina, I can't even remember when, 10 to 15 years ago now.
Oh, it was longer. You were my prof.
Yeah, it was
Your
like
program.
the years kind of go by quickly, right? And Sabrina was a student of mine in the public relations certificate program, and she was the top student in the class. She blew me away even then when she was just sort of starting out in her career. And since then, I've followed her career with interest. Every time I stumble on one of her feature stories that she's written, I'm gripped. She has such a talent for hooking you into a story. And, you know, when I started thinking about communications experts that I could introduce all of you to this semester, I immediately thought of her. It's not just me that thinks she's talented and a force to be reckoned with. Sabrina's been recognized by the Governor General of Canada for using her talents in communications to support organizations in our community like Regina Cat Rescue and Carmichael Outreach, and you know, basically enhancing the vibrancy of the local arts scene as a volunteer with organizations like Regina Lyric Musical Theatre. And you may recognize her as being the driving force and spokesperson for the rally around homelessness. Remember the I Got You underwear donation campaign? That was her brainchild, and she did so much great work around that. I also had the good fortune to see her incredible skills as an actor with Regina Little Theatre last year. She's on Sask Culture's Creative Kids Provincial Committee. By the way, love the photo they have on their webpage with you, Sabrina, with one of your cats. Anyways, I could go on and on about how amazing this woman is, but I'm going to let you see for yourself. So I'm so pleased to be able to turn things over to you, Sabrina, and to tell you how grateful we are for taking the time to put this presentation together for us. Sabrina's going to speak for about an hour, and then we're going to have a chance to move into some breakout rooms to network with a smaller group of people to talk about some of the things that, you know, we hear Sabrina bring up today. So take it away, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Lynn. So I'm just going to get right into it because I'm going to throw so much information at you over the next hour. So at the end, I'm going to give you my email address. So if you have any questions or you want to chat, absolutely get in touch with me. Let's see. I want to start with a metaphor from an obscure Carol Shields essay. She was writing about writers and critics, but it also applies to our profession. Imagine the person you're writing about is a tree, and the tree produces leaves or the exceptional things that they do. As communicators, we're the gardener who rakes those leaves up after they've fallen. We're not the creators, the ones breaking new ground. Our subjects are. But we are talking about what they do, and we are disseminating their work into the world through storytelling. We are part of the creative process as well. And what we do is incredibly important. So today, let's talk about how storytelling can amplify our work as public relations professionals. I'm going to go through the agenda for today. So we're going to talk about first how to identify good stories. Then we're going to talk about the basics of PR writing, which is about your audience, the interview, how we express that and the styles that we use. Then we're going to talk about aligning PR writing with your organizational goals. And then we'll get into readability, which is making sure that your stuff gets read, and how to repurpose content on different platforms. And then we're going to wrap up with talking about how we can bring human intelligence to artificial intelligence. So anything can be a story. It's all in how you tell it. So let's give you an example. There was one guy who got run over by a boat and had to learn to walk again. And the second guy had an amusing interaction at a department store. Well, guess who won the National Speakers Association storytelling competition? It was the second guy, the one who had the department store story. So anything can be a compelling story. You have the power as a communicator to make it relevant to your audience and to make them come along with you for the ride and even take action if that's what's needed. So how do you identify a good story? Well, first, you have to know your audience. Who are they? What do they care about? What compelled them to be involved in your organization? If you don't know the answers to these questions, it's time to get out there and talk to those people who support you. You could do this with surveys, focus groups, conversations, or looking at your social media and website stats and metrics. Try to understand what makes your audience tick. A lot of times when you're creating a strategic plan, a lot of times you might consult with people during that process. And so you want to go back and try and access some of that information when you're writing your stories. And you want to make sure you're touching base with your audience on a regular basis. So when it comes down to it, readers are reading what you write or watching your videos or listening to your podcasts based on one thing. What's in it for me or with them? People are looking to learn something, to feel something, to be entertained. Good stories are about people or something you can humanize. Here are some questions you need to ask yourself when you're trying to identify a good story. Who are the people involved in your organization? Staff, volunteers, donors, the people you serve? What stories illustrate the impact that you have on individuals or the community? How does your organization make the world a better place? And why should people care? So, organizations write press releases for themselves, not for readers. Journalists are tired of releases that aren't relevant to the target audience. So what you want to do is lead with your audience, not your organization. I'm going to get into writing leads for stories in a little bit, but here's an example of what I'm talking about for a headline for a news release and how to lead with the audience, not the organization. So again, Lynn mentioned that I was the spokesperson for the Rally Around Homelessness I Got You campaign, which raised underwear for Regina's Homeless. So if you were to write a typical headline that a lot of people do write and fall into, it would be Rally Around Homelessness announces I Got You campaign. But that puts the organization first, and it doesn't talk about the impact on the audience. So do people even know what that organization is, where they operate, what the campaign is, what it does? Why should I care? So it leaves a lot of questions, and the media is going to skim. They get a lot of news releases. They may not care enough to pay attention to it. You got to get their attention. They want to know what's in it for their audience. So the second headline mentions the people who will benefit from the campaign and doesn't even mention the organization. I Got You campaign collects underwear for Regina's Homeless. Now, it doesn't literally put the audience first, but it implies it. The audience is Regina people who care about the community. It talks about the impact of the campaign, who it's helping, what it's doing. It makes a connection between the clever title and what it's doing. And that is compelling, and that campaign title attracts attention. It shows how it's helping the community. It's about people who care about Regina, people who care about homeless people. It makes you want to read more. Why is underwear something that needs to be collected? How can I get involved? And the second headline is the one we used in the campaign news release, and every media outlet picked up the story. So when it comes to engaging reporters and in turn readers, you have to lead with the reporter's audience and not with your organization and its staff. So it's a really good idea in your marketing messaging is to use the word you and put the audience first. Because then the reader knows directly what's in it for me. Studies have shown using you can increase conversations by up to 47%. This goes for media posts, social media posts, blog posts, just any kind of marketing material. Questions are more effective than statements. People engage with questions. They're more likely to click on a headline that includes you. So how do you? Do I need? Should I? Can I? There's a quote here from this woman who is my mentor and an incredible communicator. And she says, your organization isn't the topic. Your products and services aren't the topic. The topic isn't the topic. The reader is the topic. So to inspire readers and draw them in, you want to write about them, not about yourself. So once you've decided what makes for a good story and you've discovered the human interest angle, what happens then? When you're writing the story for your organization about a person or a program or a priority, the number one most important thing is the interview. First, you have to find someone to talk to. That could be a staff member, a volunteer, a board member, someone served by the organization, a member of the community, all of the above. Who represents the story well? And what makes for a good interview? Human interest. Will this be interesting to my audience? What angle can I take to make them interesting? Curiosity. Do you actually care about the story? What does this person has to say? Get invested in it. Get curious. And that leads into the last point, which is research. Read up on them or the initiative. Look up news stories, annual reports, websites, and let this inform the questions that you ask. So this is how I come up with interview questions. I get my research together, and then I think about the angle that I want to take with the story. What is your one sentence takeaway that you want people to get from this article? What do your readers want to read? And that's about them, not about what you wish they would want to read. And then I brainstorm questions based on that. So I do kind of an origin one, which is like, how did this come about? For a profile, I'll ask if I'm writing about someone who has a profession that's interesting. I'll say, you know, how did you know first off that you wanted to go into that? Or how old were you when you decided that was interesting to you? And you can get some really good answers that way. You want to think about what made you want to do this in the first place for them and who helped them along the way. And if there's certain influential people who've helped them, then you want to take that and follow that up and interview those people too. So you want to ask them if they're doing an initiative, why is it important to them? And they can get really passionate about this because they're obviously doing it for a reason. So when they get passionate, then you get some really nice quotes for your story. Ask them why it's important to the people they serve, and that looks at the impact of this on their community. How have things changed for the people as a result of this initiative? Again, impact. I like to ask people what they've learned. Sometimes I ask them, what advice would you give to someone else if it's like a profile about a career or that sort of thing? Or what advice would you give to your previous self about this? And then get other people to talk from their perspectives about that person or about that initiative. And that could be people impacted. So you really just want to get people talking. Sometimes people are more loquacious than others. So if someone is more brief in their answers, you've got to think about follow-up questions or re-asking questions in different ways and just trying to make them feel comfortable and get them talking. And you do this as well by staying engaged and caring and listening. And that's really important. In terms of how long an interview should take, if I'm writing a feature story, so that would be, I would say, around usually 2,000 words or 1,500 words, like a magazine type story. The interview is usually an hour with the main person. And if I'm doing a web story, so let's say maximum 600 words, it's usually about half an hour. And you might interview a few people. If you're interviewing secondary people, it could just be a 10, 15-minute interview. I tend not to pre-write the story. Like some people might do that where they write and then they kind of ask a very specific question and get the interviewee to kind of write a quote that's going to fit right in that perfect part of the story. Some people might do this. I personally don't, because I want it to be more open-ended and I don't really want to lead the person into saying what I want them to say. I find it more authentic to follow them and to see where they go. And it takes a bit longer, quite honestly. Like if you were just interviewing someone for just a single quote, you could probably do it in 5 minutes if you led them in the right direction. But I want to hear what they have to say. And it can take you somewhere more interesting than what you thought. You might think the story's a certain thing, but then they take you in a different direction. And I find that when I'm doing an interview, that's where I get my leads from. That's where I get my ideas of the compelling way that you can pull someone into a story. So let's get down to what happens when you're actually writing. You've probably heard about the inverted pyramid before. It's a staple of PR writing, and it's something that's drilled into our heads in journalism and public relations school. So what it is a hierarchical organization of ideas and facts, starting with the most important element and moving to the least. It was invented in the late 19th century for use with the telegraph. And at that time, you needed to get the news out right away because there would be outages and it could get cut off before you got to the point. So you just needed to get it out immediately, right off the bat, just first sentence. And then the evolution of typesetting also reinforced the pyramid. Editors dealing with columns of literal lead found it easier to cut the stories from the bottom than the middle. So you put the least important information at the bottom, gets cut, no big deal. Here are the elements of the inverted pyramid. So we start with the lead, which is the first section where the most vital information is presented. It answers the who, what, when, where, why, how of questions related to the story. You want that lead to grab the reader's attention and give them the essential facts up front. It begins at the end, giving away the ending at the very beginning. So the butler did it. Going into the body, following the lead, the body of the article provides supporting details and additional information. This section expands on the facts introduced in the lead, offering background, context, and any developments. It's structured in descending order of importance, with each paragraph providing less critical details than the one before. It adds detail in no particular order until there's nothing left to say or the allotted time is up. It buries the context somewhere in the body. And then we get to the tail. This is the least newsworthy information. It might include supplementary details, additional quotes, or information that is tangential but related to the overall story. And this is the part of the article that can be cut if there's space required. I don't really use the inverted pyramid, and I don't think you should either. And this is why. The inverted pyramid is the worst form ever invented for explaining something to another person in words. It's boring. It's not compelling. It doesn't capture your information. It's not easy to read because the background of the story is at the bottom and it's hierarchical rather than logical. It's hard for readers to understand and follow. And remember, So we'll get to be talking to AI later on, but a lot of PR professionals are worried that AI will make them obsolete because it can write quickly and good enough. AI can write a great inverted pyramid, but what it can't do is write a feature story, a feature style story, like how I'm going to teach you to write in a little bit. This is where we as PR professionals differentiate ourselves and show that we're irreplaceable with storytelling. Your competitors are using inverted pyramid. So not using it makes you stand out. Not as many journalists are in newsrooms as before. They're very stretched. There's fewer of them. There's, a ton of stories to tell and not a lot of space. So there's a better chance of journalists publishing your news release verbatim if you use a feature style structure over the inverted pyramid. And it's more compelling for those readers as well. And they're the ones that are your audience. So the inverted pyramid is one tool in your toolbox, but it's not the tool for everything. That being said, you can use it. I'll let you use it a couple times. Communicating urgent information. So if the building's on fire and you want people to get out, say that first. Sharing bad news. Let's say there's some layoffs or budget cuts or funding cuts. That's when you want to stay really basic and just put the information out there. And if you happen to have a telegraph machine, you're allowed to use it then too. So if you can't use the inverted pyramid anymore, what can you use? The feature story style structure. So what you want to do is imagine a stack of boxes. You've got the beginning, the middle, and the end. In the feature style story structure, the beginning sets up the information. The middle is organized into logically arranged parts that develop the setup, and the end cements the main points into readers' memories. So tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Feature story writing is more narrative with that beginning, middle, end. It often illustrates points through characters or anecdotes, and you're likely to use more colorful language and a more playful writing style. So getting into leads, we've mentioned this before. You want to grab someone's attention and pull the readers in. I think it's probably the most important thing about a story, not because it's the meat of the story, but because that's how you get people to read it. So you want your leads to be concrete. You want to show, don't tell. So you want to find points of human interest, engage the five senses, use a compelling statistic, use an anecdote, a description, or a metaphor. I made up this lead. This is not the lead I used for the Rally Around Homelessness campaign, but I just wanted to give you an example of what not to do. So Rally Around Homelessness today announced the start of their I Got You campaign, which aims to collect 488 pairs of new underwear to distribute to Regina's homeless by the August long weekend. It's got all the information you need, but it's about the organization rather than the reader, and it's boring. So this is what we actually used. A clean pair of underwear. It's something many take for granted, but it can be an out-of-reach luxury for the folks living on Regina's streets. That's why Rally Around Homelessness is challenging city residents to donate new underwear to their I Got You campaign, a total of 488 pairs by the August long weekend. So the difference here is that we start with that image of a clean pair of underwear, a new pair of underwear, and you get people thinking about how they take it for granted in their lives and what it would be like if you didn't have that. What's in it for me? How does this make me feel? How can I help? Ideally, you would start it with the person who needs the service and tell their story. But in this particular case, it would have been exploitative to do that. So we went more with the image of the underwear. So as I mentioned, the campaign goal was to collect 488 pairs of underwear in less than a month. And we actually collected 2,500 pairs because of the media campaign and getting the audience engaged. I heard there's some people from the University of Regina here today. So I do write feature stories for the alumni magazine Degrees. And I wanted to use some examples from those stories to show you how to write compelling leads. So this one is a human interest angle. And Amelia Becker doesn't remember the moment of impact. One instant she was riding in the school bus, and the next she was being driven to the hospital. Everything looked white. Later, she was told that when the bus collided with another vehicle and flipped over, she hit her head on the roof. She was originally diagnosed with a concussion, but after several weeks of no improvement, it became clear that she had suffered a moderate brain injury. She was only 11 years old. The next one is engaging the five senses. And this one kind of shows how it's important not to just interview people on the phone or on Zoom, but to actually go down to where they're operating and get it. Like this particular one is about a virtual golf course with robots operating the golf. And I went down there. So standing outside the warehouse in the industrial area of Regina, you can hear the thunk, thunk, thunk of golf balls ricocheting off wooden gutters. Once inside, you'll see almost a dozen mini golf courses, each with its own theme. Everything from carnival crazy to saloon old west to tropical adventure. What you won't see, however, is a single player. Putters are controlled by robots operated in real time by people all over North America who are playing through an app on their mobile devices. So that is engaging the five senses. And then this one is an anecdote. You stink. It's not the most elegant piece of programming code Natasha Jacques has written, but to be fair, it was her first program and she was only 7 years old at the time. And then the rest of the quote talks about what that program was and how it came about and giving that context. But it gets your attention. Circling back to the beginning section of the feature style story, it begins with the lead to draw the reader in, and then it moves on to the nut graph, which tells the reader where you're taking them. That is a walkaway sentence. So you start every writing project with a one sentence walkaway, and it would help you figure out what goes into the story, what stays out, and how to frame your story. So you ask yourself, what's the point? Why should I care? The third part of that beginning box is the background. So you would tell the history, give any definitions or broader context. This is optional. You can leave it out if you don't need it. So the second box is the middle. And the middle fulfills the promise you made in the nut graph. So you want to expand on the walkaway sentence and explain why this is the focus of your story. You tell them only what they need to know, so you don't have to give them all the information. And then you want to make the body copy scannable. So you would want to make sure it's written for readability. So use subheads, bullets, boldface. And then that third box is the conclusion or the end of the story. So that section, the first section of the end section is wrap up. So that summarizes the story or suggests next steps, which is tell them what you told them. You might want to include a call to action. This is where you give readers next steps or go and do information. You might let your readers know how to register for a webinar, take the survey, attend your event. And then you've got the kicker, which leaves a lasting impression. This is where the lead draws people into the story with concrete, creative, and provocative details. The kicker uses those same approaches to let readers go. So you want it to be concrete. So choose a telling detail for the end of the piece that reveals new meaning about the topic. You want it to be creative. So that means you can think about what fiction writers use. So that could be an anecdote, scene setting, human interest, metaphors. You want to provoke a question in the reader's mind so they keep thinking about your story after they've finished the last paragraph. Another option, these are all options, you don't use them all. Another option is to close with a sound bite. So this is probably the most common type of kicker. You let the subject matter expert have the final word, and I really like that one myself. And then the final one is come full circle. So what you would want to do is come back to the lead at the very end. And that gives the readers a sense that they've moved from the beginning to the end in a complete satisfying manner. This is my favorite. It is so satisfying. You may notice stand-up comics will sometimes use this, and they'll do a callback to an earlier joke, and the audience just loves it. So that is my favorite. It doesn't always work in every story, but when you can use it, it's pretty great. So I'm going to give you some examples. Again, this is from Degrees magazine of the lead and then the kicker. So in this one, it's about a filmmaker. And I asked her, how did you know you wanted to be a filmmaker? And this is where the lead ended up going. It all started with her late Auntie Geraldine's VHS camcorder. Candy Fox discovered it during her childhood in the 1990s on the Piapot First Nation. I remember having so much fun with it. I think that's where I grew up. I grew a sense of wanting to make movies and to direct, especially, she recalls. I remember being kind of bossy and telling my cousins what to do in front of the camera. And then at the end, I used the soundbite technique of letting the subject have the final say. When asked what advice she would give film students graduating today, Fox counsels, just keep going. There were some points when I started out when I wasn't sure if I was going to get work or not, but I just kept with it. I tried to do things that were meaningful for me, and I tried to tell stories from the heart. And that's what has really guided me, to lead with my heart. And you'll see here, and I'll talk about this a bit later, but directing from the heart is the title of the story. So it reflects back to not only the lead and the kicker, but then the title. This one kind of starts with a startling fact. And you'll see that in a sec here. Coffee has long been a beverage of choice for writers struggling to meet a deadline. For Regina Creative Rowley, aka Charles Anderson, it's been more than fuel, it's inspiration. There's an idea in every cup. Different beans trigger different flavors of ideas. You have to rummage through hundreds of ideas to find one good one, he explains. Rowley is never at a loss for ideas, as he drinks 25 cups a day. I think more than 25 would be excessive. And then the kicker for this one, I came full circle. So what's next for Rowley? He's finishing up a number of projects, including a humorous illustrated autobiography and a collection of his most popular cartoons and drawings. A Canadian production company has acquired the rights to his short story, The Ashtray, and is currently developing it into a feature-length film. I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to get a cameo in it. Drinking coffee in the background, perhaps, he muses. So, getting into headlines, excuse me a moment. These are really nice ways that you can have, again, like the lead is really important, but the headline kind of gets you to read the lead. So you want it to reflect the story, but you want it to be punchy. You want it to catch attention. So here are some of the ways that I use headlines. Alliteration, so you might say reading revolution. Rhyming, the story I just read you is called Holy Moly, It's Rolly. Idiom, I did another story for the U of R about the U of R press, and it was called Hot Off the Press. You could do an adapted idiom. So again, my mentor, Anne Wiley, wrote an e-publication about thinking outside the pyramid, and it's all about why the inverted pyramid doesn't work. And then you can pull a quote or a phrase out of the article, like directing from the heart. Now, I understand we have at least one folk from the South Saskatchewan Independent Living Center here today. So I looked at your annual report. And I found an interesting story about a client named Robert Kakakaway. And in reading the annual report story, this is what I learned about Robert. He's a Silk client living with cerebral palsy and an intellectual disability. He lives independently in his own home with 10 hours of support a week from Silk. He loves learning new cooking skills and prepares meals independently. He has made a career transition recently from a greeter at Walmart to a position at the Brant Center. He coaches basketball for children in grades 6 to 7. And he's an example of how anyone, regardless of disability or barriers, can lead a full and independent life with the right opportunities and support. And I don't know, I think he's far more interesting than me. He's doing so much cool stuff. It's a great feature about him. But I thought we could punch it up just a little bit. So in using the tools that I just gave you about how to write a feature story, all the information here about Robert is great. And we have all the steps, all the little pieces of information we need to make that feature. So in looking at this information, I started thinking about some angles for the story, what the lead could be, what the focus could be. And this is what immediately came to mind. So I thought the cooking thing was really interesting. Everyone can relate to it. We all do it, hopefully. Um, and with cooking, you can kind of talk about some of the five senses, which is compelling. And then I was wondering, does he cook for other people? And then maybe you could talk to those people and see what they think of his cooking and what it's like to watch him cook or eat his food and what it tastes like. I thought it was also neat that he has this new career. Maybe we talk about what's his favorite part about the job. I also thought there's some really fun events at the Brant Center. So you could evoke the five senses there. Like if it's a hockey game, you could talk about the chill on the ice and the roar of the crowd and the sound of the skates skidding along the ice, scraping along the ice. So that kind of got me thinking. And I thought the basketball thing was really cool. So you could come up with some basketball idioms and metaphors and kind of sprinkle that throughout for interest. And then I also thought it might be really cool to talk to those kids and the assistant coaches and be like, okay, what's Robert like to work with? What kind of coach is he? This is, really interesting. So keeping that in mind, this is what I did to rewrite the article. So the lead, I engaged the five senses with the cooking. The smell of sizzling onions wafts from Robert Kakakaway's kitchen and down the hallway of his apartment building. It's Saturday afternoon, and for Robert, that means one thing. It's chili making time. It's my favorite thing to make, he says. And then the nut graph, which is your takeaway sentence, your one sentence to walk away. Silk's home support services empower Robert and others with disabilities to live independently. Then we get into the background, and I didn't write this out, but in this part, I would outline his disabilities. I would talk about Silk's role in supporting him, about how they've taught him to cook independently on the weekends. And I would talk to his support person and talk about like what they've witnessed with Robert and how he's become so independent and what a great life he's leading and just their take on it. And then getting into the body. So we start with the cooking, and then I'd want to get into the coaching basketball and talk to a player or assistant coach about Robert and the role he plays. And then I would talk to his employer and see like, what kind of employee is he like? What's he do there? Just like what's he like to work with? And then getting into the summary, I would put Robert is an example of how anyone, regardless of disability or barriers, can lead a full and independent life with the right opportunities and supports. And then for the kicker, I brought it full circle. As for that chili recipe, it's a secret, Robert says, though if you ask really nicely, he may just spill the beans. Switching gears now, I promise I talk about aligning your writing with your organizational goals. I always start with a strategic plan. This is particularly important when you're writing stories for an annual report, but really everything you do should tie back to your strategic plan. Ask yourself, How do the stories you're telling align with your organization's goals? And if they don't align, don't tell them. Okay, I also heard there's some people from the Regina Public Library here. I was looking at your strategic plan, and this is what I learned. So the vision of the library is to be a dynamic hub of literacy, lifelong learning, curiosity, and new ideas. They want to inspire individuality, connection, and diversity. The mission is free and open access to resources, community space where people and ideas meet, programs and services that support reading, curiosity, and discovery, and community opportunities that complement and strengthen the public library offering. So look at all of these words very carefully. They were chosen very carefully and for a reason. And you want to tie your stories back to the vision and mission. Talk to the people impacted by the programs. Find those human interest angles to reflect the strategic plan in everything you do. I worked at Sask Arts, which was formerly the Saskatchewan Arts Board, for almost 16 years. And during that time, I wrote their annual report. And I did it more like a magazine than I did like an annual report. But I had a strategy behind the story selection. So I started by just brainstorming stories that looked interesting to me and that I thought would be compelling and that readers would be interested in. But then what I did was I assigned each of those stories to a different pillar of the strategic plan. And then I balanced those themes to make sure that there was a balance of stories between all of those pillars and to make sure that different programs were represented and different demographics were represented, and then that it was broadly represented in the report. So think about how the stories you're telling reinforce the goals of your strategic plan. Can you make a connection there? And sometimes it's sad, but you don't always get to tell the stories you want to. You have to make sure they're serving your organization's key goals. And if not, you shouldn't be telling the story. Everything you do should reinforce the core of the organization. So let's get into, we've got our leads and we got our kickers and we've got our strategic direction, but we want to make sure people read it. So what you want to do is write simply, make it scannable. So you want short words, short sentences, subheadings, bullet points. Simple doesn't mean dumbing it down. Readability is about access for everyone. It's not just about people with lower reading levels. It's for everyone. You could have a PhD and still appreciate a very clear writing, short sentences, just get across to the point, scan something. You want to aim for a grade 6 to 8 reading level. And you can determine this if you want to turn on your Microsoft Word readability stats. So just Google how to do that, and it will tell you what grade level that you're writing at. So if you're writing at a too high grade level, you're going to have to simplify, and you can kind of see that number come down. There is an app called Hemingway. It's free. I'm going to give you a link to it at the end. And it weeds out ineffective writing and it increases readability and makes your writing bold and clear. It'll flag writing that is less readable. So you just kind of take whatever writing you're doing you throw it into this app and it starts highlighting things that, maybe you've got passive tense, or maybe you're using words that are too big, and it kind of shows you how readable your work is. And it's a really good tool to kind of teach yourself how to write more simply. Going into more metrics here, maybe not metrics, word numbers. Look at the number of words that your article or blog post or whatever you're writing is, and divide it by 200. And that gives you how many minutes that it takes to read it. So if you're writing an article for your website, I would say you would want to keep it under 3 minutes. So that's 600 words. Actually, what I used to do when I worked at Sask Arts is when I wrote a web story, I'd put at the top 3-minute read. And then if people would know that it's only gonna take 3 minutes of their time, and if they don't have 3 minutes, then maybe they just read part of it. But most of the time, it's like 3 minutes, I got 3 minutes. And then they know what they're getting into. You want to keep it under a minute for emails. Journalists spend less than 1 minute reading news releases, and people spend 51 seconds reading emails. So you want to make it compelling and easy to read. The ideal length of words for readability, 5 characters per word. Sentences, 8 to 14 words. Paragraphs, 1 to 2 sentences per paragraph. What's really nice is you can use AI to rewrite what you've written to be the ideal length of words or sentences for readability. So you just put a prompt in saying, write this in sentences that are 12 words or less, and it will rewrite it for you. In language, you want to write in verbs, not adjectives or adverbs. I would say this is something AI fails at. They use a lot of adjectives, and verbs are more powerful language. When you're repurposing content for different media, you want to keep in mind different audiences and tailor that content accordingly. Use feature style for storytelling in news releases and annual reports too. In social media, if you're writing about an event, photos great. Make sure you use photos to catch attention, but just keep it short, 1 sentence. I would say when you're typing it out in Word in, say, 11-point font, it would be 1 line of text, which is short. But again, you want to maybe put the text about the event on the image, or just the basics of the text about the event in the post, or you want to post it, link it to your website so you get more traffic to your website. And then for web articles, I would say, a story about a person or an announcement. Again, you can go a little bit longer, but you want to keep it brief. And then you want to just a couple sentences, and then post it to your website and get people to go to the website for the traffic and SEO. Web articles, 600 words or fewer, as I mentioned before. Head, subhead, bullets, short sentences, short paragraphs. You have to keep in mind that people are skimming. So write it more like an outline than a thesis. People tune out when they see a wall of text. So you want to make sure that it just gets broken up. Really nice. E-newsletters, no more than 200 words. To make sure your email gets opened, I'll give you this tool at the end as well. It's Omnisend's free email subject line tester. So it's just like, again, a website, it's free. And so it helps you create a catchy subject line so people will click on your e-newsletter or an email and actually read it. Because if they don't click, there's no point. So what it does is you take the subject line, you put it into the website, and then it will tell you what percentage of likelihood it is that someone will open it. And so it'll give you a score. I try and aim for about 80%. And then it gives you like tips on how to strengthen it, like make it shorter, make numbers in it, do sentence case instead of full capitalization on each letter, and you're more likely to get opened. And then I guess I would like to say that annual reports don't have to be boring. I made mine like a magazine. I had great photos, compelling writing. If you go to my website, which I will give to you at the end, you can see examples of the annual reports that I did. We won several awards for publication and for writing locally and nationally on these because of the magazine approach instead of the corporate or typical approach. And for annual report, I keep the stories to about 250 to 350 words. Getting into AI. So, let's see. I went to PR conference in 2023, and it turned out to be all about AI. PR professionals have a fear that AI is going to replace us, which I mentioned before. But the reality is that you are a better writer than a robot. What it does is make you more efficient, faster in what you do. AI is something that we need to accept and embrace, or we're going to get left behind. The only thing that's going to replace you is someone who knows how to use AI better than you. And this is particularly the case in the PR, in the nonprofit world that you're in. Chances are you're the only communications person in the organization, or maybe there's a couple of you, but I know I was the only communications person at the Sask Arts for 16 years. And yeah, you're overworked, you're doing everything on your own, you're trying to juggle a bunch of stuff, you don't have a lot of time. And this is a way to like have your own personal assistant or an intern. And then what you do is you use AI as a tool for inspiring storytelling and creativity. So it's all the buzz, but there are some serious drawbacks about it, and you've probably heard about these. Um, it'll have hallucinations. That's the term that they use in the industry, and that just means it makes up information. The writing can be very formulaic. I find it kind of flowery and full of adjectives, which just makes me cringe. It kind of sounds canned and stale, like not a real person. It can give very generic information. And there's concerns about plagiarism. And if I know there's students here and some of your profs have forbidden you from using it, and there could be major repercussions for it. But what if I told you there's a way to use it that's ethical, that's not plagiarism, that's not cheating, that can get around trackers, that can make you more productive and efficient? Wouldn't you want to give it a try? The secret is bringing human intelligence to artificial intelligence. That means more storytelling and human interest. You want to treat it like an intern or a personal assistant. Use it for research or to reduce word count or to come up with an outline or to write a first draft. Use AI as a tool for inspiring storytelling and creativity. And keep in mind that Google prioritizes the best article in their searches. So it used to be that it was like keywords or that sort of thing, but now it's about originality. It's about well-written, well-researched work, detail over abstraction. And it downgrades anything that seems formulaic or AI written. So it is better for you to take the AI and use it as a tool rather than your writer, and just use it to augment yourself. This is my favorite quote as to why you should start using AI. You can edit a bad page, you can't edit a blank page. The author wasn't talking about AI when she said this. She was just encouraging people to get something down on the page, but it works in this context. The second quote here is the hard part is getting to the top of page 1. And again, it's not someone talking about AI, but this is another area where AI can help in that pre-writing stage, all the things you do before you enter one keystroke. So how do you get to the top of page 1? Well, AI can help. Here's a high-level overview of what it can do for you. So dreaming, helping you think, that pre-writing work. Drudgery, lightening your load. And that could be time-consuming tasks like first drafts or editing. Design, building your content. So that could be creating presentations, slides, other content, creating course materials, suggesting prompts and materials for trainings and workshops. And then development, which is advancing your work, like drafting policies, developing strategic plans, and creating project plans. So getting to that first point of dreaming, what we mean by that is you would want to use AI to brainstorm ideation, overcoming the blank page syndrome, going back to that Jodi Picoult quote I talked about earlier, the blank page. Summarizing and synthesizing complex content. You can use this with scholarly or scientific articles, for example, or get it to explain something you don't understand. Research and analysis. You have to be careful with this and double check sources and always avoid that incorrect information or plagiarism or AI making stuff up. The nice thing is, I know that there's a free AI tool, ChatGPT, but there's also a paid version. And if you get the paid version, it will give you sources. And then you can click into those sources and double check and make sure the content is correct and not made up. And the final thing here is asking questions and learning. So if you're using ChatGPT or another tool, you kind of need to be a prompt engineer. And that sounds kind of scary, but and intimidating a little bit. But I have a list. It's a prompt list that I use for AI, and Lynn is going to send that out after the talk. So some of the prompts here that I like to use. So if you're understanding complex language, complex ideas, I would say explain this in plain language and paste it all in. Summarize this research. So you could take a really complex scholarly article, scientific article, and get it summarized in 200 words or a couple sentences. Turn this feature into a benefit. I'm not sure how much you guys would use it in nonprofits, but I work at Brandt currently, and I write about heavy machinery. And sometimes there's something about this many axles and tilt deck, and I'm like, I don't know what this means for my audience because I don't entirely understand this technical information. So if I say turn this feature into a benefit, and I put those elements in, it'll tell me what that does for the audience. So it's like, oh, the tilt deck makes it easier to load things up or something like that. And so that's super helpful. When we talked earlier about knowing your audience, you just want to ask, what are whoever saying about whatever? So what are marketers saying about AI? And then it will give you the information you need to understand what the audience knows, what they're talking about, and then you can be more relevant to them. If you're writing a lead, again, we talked earlier about the tree being the people we write about, and us being those people breaking up the leaves at the bottom. And you can use AI to write you a metaphor. So that is really a cool thing to do, and it can give you that compelling lead. Whereas instead of asking AI to write you an article and it's going to be all boring and generic, you're doing something really compelling. And again, headlines. I'm not always the best at headlines. I'm getting better, but I've thrown in a 2,000 word article into ChatGPT and said, write 3 headlines for this article. And I don't use what it gives me verbatim, but sometimes it gives me a word that makes me tweaks on something or a way to summarize something, and I can play off it. And again, that directing from the heart headline I showed you earlier was actually from AI, and they pulled it out of that quote. So it can really get the juices flowing and get you that interesting lead and that interesting headline. You just need to know how to prompt it. So that drudgery one was the next one we talked about. And these are the things that you don't want to do that are not overly creative, but you have to do them. So your first draft, what you would want to do is put everything, all the details and quotes in a prompt and ask it to write an article about the information in however many words. Again, don't use this word for word. It's just more to get the ideas on the page. And maybe there's a turn of phrase or just a structure that you can work with. In any event, it reduces the time needed to get started and done. Rewriting or reducing current drafts. Some people find it really hard to pare down their words. And if they want to write a 500 word article, maybe they're writing 900 words, and then it's really hard for them to cut it back. And fortunately, AI is really good at this. So you can say, cut this back to 300 words, cut this back 30%. And then rewriting or reducing current drafts, you can prompt AI to add subheads and bullets for readability. And reviewing and proofreading, no more typos and grammatical errors. I think AI is really good for people with disabilities. If you're dyslexic or if you have any other ADHD, wanting to focus, it is really great and it helps kind of level the field for people with disabilities. So here's a prompt for getting your email opened. So I mentioned earlier that Omnisend online tool to determine the best email subject. So what I would do is pop the email or the e-newsletter into AI and say, write me 3 subject lines for the following email. And then I would take each one of those and I would put it into the tool and see what the percentage rate is for opening. If it's like 87%, that's awesome. If it says, hey, make this shorter, then you play around with it and try and get that percentage up. Readability prompt. I like to throw the whole article in and say, rewrite this at a grade 7 reading level. I think sometimes when you have CEOs or folks who are more academically minded, and they write at a higher reading level, sometimes it's great to just take their stuff and throw it in and see how it can be simplified. Another way of saying this is to say, hit 70 on the Flesch Reading Ease score, which is another tool that allows for readability statistics. And then if you're repurposing the content and you have a 2,000 word article and you want to make it into a blog post that's 300 words, just pop it in and say, reduce this article to 300 words. And AI is like a really great way to do that. So AI isn't something to be scared of or to avoid. This is something that can really help you. It's not a replacement for what you need to do, but it will help you get more done in less time. And I know it feels like cheating, but it's not cheating. It's just working smarter, not harder. Now, not everyone's going to be a prompt engineer off the bat, but what you need to do is just play with it and try and give it as specific prompts as possible. And I find too, you can start a conversation with it. So start with the prompt, write 3 headlines. And then if you don't like them, say, write 10 more and write using a metaphor for this, or, try and use this turn of phrase in this somehow. And I also would say consider a paid AI tool. Again, I mentioned ChatGPT has a paid version, but I really like writer.com, and a paid tool will give you better results. And again, at the end, I will give you links to all of these tools. So to recap, this is what we talked about today. How to identify good stories, the basics of PR writing, knowing your audience, the art of the interview, and the tools we use in order to write our styles. Aligning PR writing with organizational goals, readability and making sure your stuff gets read, and repurposing content on different platforms. And then finally, bringing human intelligence to artificial intelligence. So this is my list of tools and links that, again, Lynn will send this out. So I mentioned my guru, which is Anne Wiley. She's a writing coach. She has an e-newsletter with tips. She also has workshops. The workshops are not inexpensive. So if you're a nonprofit, it might be out of reach. But her newsletter has some really nice tips in it. And she also has a paid section of her website with articles. Some of the articles are free, but she does have a paywall. And you could get a lot of information about that. Again, I mentioned writer.com. This is the one I use. It's a paid one. It's $2 less US, less than ChatGPT. So it's $18 US a month. And the nice thing I like about this is ChatGPT is kind of aimed at everyone, but Writer is specifically for writers. So you don't have to be a prompt engineer to use it. There's tools like how to generate a blog or social media post. You can check for reading level. There's a style sheet. So if you decide that you want to use the Oxford comma throughout, it'll flag if you don't use it. If you want to use contractions all the time, it'll flag when you don't use it. So you can have this like really great style sheet that gives you consistency in your writing and helps you with editing. So then we have ChatGPT, and again, they have a paid version. If you only can use the free version, that's fine. But the problem is it doesn't have web access, so it doesn't have the most up-to-date information in it. But it works in a pinch. And again, you need to kind of be a prompt engineer, but I'll give you my prompt list. Lynn will send that out. Omnisend, this is that email subject line tester where you just pop those email subject lines in and it'll tell you how how likely it is for someone to click on it. This one I didn't mention in my talk. It's Emojipedia. So you know how like when you're using your phone and you're making social media posts and you can put your emojis in the social media posts, but you kind of have to use your phone to do it? This is a desktop tool. So you go in, you look up an emoji like car, and you can cut and paste it into a Word file. You can cut and paste it into your social media. And it's really great for getting attention in like say a social media post, or really great for newsletter subject lines. It just makes it stand out in your inbox. So that's a really great tool. I also like the freedictionary.com, which has a dictionary thesaurus, idioms for wordplay. So I really like the idioms one. So if you're looking for a good headline, um, you can look up, say, like, I got your back. So you want to look for words that rhyme with back. Um, and you can kind of do that. So I really highly recommend that one. It's just very handy. And again, it's got like your thesaurus and that sort of things too. And then again, we'll give you my AI prompt list. So we're all storytellers. There isn't a stronger connection between people than storytelling. So if storytelling seems a little intimidating to you, I just want you to know that you can do it. You can absolutely do it. So I want to thank you for having me. Again, you'll get these slides and you can click on my website, and there's samples of my writing on there if you want to read more. Annual reports and those feature articles for degrees are on there. And then if you want to email me, I'm happy to chat with any of you about anything we've talked about, or about your communications career and your path. I would be happy to do that. So thank you so much for being here.
Wonderful. We're going to put you in breakout rooms in a couple minutes, but before we do that, is there anybody that has any burning questions to Sabrina that they'd like to throw out to her? I know you've given us a lot of great food for thought, Sabrina. Hearing none, I'm gonna let Colleen, I think, has put people into groups. If you happen to end up in a group where like there's people that just didn't show up and there's nobody, just come back to the main room and we'll put you in a different group. But I think we've got a number of our PR students, so they will start off the conversations.
Okay, we're good to go then.
I guess we can pause the recording. I'm just wondering if we could just have a a brief kind of little conversation about what we talked about in our breakout rooms. Did anyone have any great revelations? I hope you enjoyed each other's companies. We want to start with group number 1.
Hi, it's Belinda, and Terry had joined me in group number 1, and then 2 students. So they weren't able to stay very long, but no, it was nice just kind of meeting somebody else in the industry, and just learning more tools on how to get our message out there and effectively and efficiently and succinctly, which I know I struggle with, you know paring things down to make it, less burdensome sometimes too. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Anyone from group 2 want to throw out, or just anyone in general?
We spoke in our group. I'm from group 2, Kimberly, and we just spoke about, using AI. There was someone in our group who's actually my colleague who has quite a bit of experience and has learned those tricks of kind of how to talk to it to get back the right thing you want. Because I find I'm still in early usage, so I'm not too schooled on what to put in to get out exactly what I want. So sometimes I have to start over and put different questions in. But it's learning a different language almost, how to talk to AI to get the results back that you want.
Now you're probably really excited to go back and try it on your next project.
Absolutely,
Really,
can't
okay?
wait.
Anybody else have some similar conversations or other things that you talked about in your groups? Or everybody's burnt out from the weekend?
I was in group number 4 and we had a really good discussion. And our group members were from all different types of organizations. Leo works at the Autism Resource Center, Penny's with the Seniors University Group, and then Sabrina, as we know, is with Brant. And I think everyone kind of said that storytelling effectively is a great tool. So it was interesting to see just kind of, it doesn't matter, I guess, the industry that you're in, that it's valuable everywhere.
Anybody else kind of want to jump in on this conversation, or just have any questions? I mean, the people that were in Sabrina's group, you were probably excited to have her in there to kind of pick her brain kind of a little bit more one-on-one, but here's your opportunity if there's any kind of last kind of burning questions that you have for her. Tanya?
Yes. Yeah, so I was mentioning in my group discussions that how one individual story can make impact for individual community or society. I mean, for the individual impact to the social change in policy making things, as well as for funding decisions for donors. So I worked in behavior change communication program. And over there, we saw how a good story can make a meaningful impact for policy making and funding decisions. So yeah, that was my I mean, inspirational things for storytelling. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I did mention that we raised like 2,500 pairs of underwear for that campaign. But what's interesting, because literally all the media got on board, the organization was able to go to a laundromat and make an agreement with them to create a voucher program where they would give out vouchers to people who didn't have access to laundry, and they could go get their laundry done for free. So because we did this underwear campaign,
Yeah,
it raised
absolutely.
awareness, and then we parlayed it into creating this like laundry campaign, which is really the real issue. That was the problem, because you can give someone underwear, but if they have no way to clean it, so it was really a successful, unexpected little campaign that just kind of ballooned It was so great.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for such a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything to say? Sabrina, I just want to reiterate what I think everybody is thinking, and even those that had to kind of jump off already, that this was, you had such great content, in your discussion, your session today, that we all really appreciate. With Colleen is going to be sending out an email, probably likely tomorrow, or sometime this week. She just told me that she thinks she may be getting COVID, so she's not feeling very well. So that in a couple of days, we'll send out that list of prompts that Sabrina was telling you about, as well as her slides, and also we'll upload it to YouTube, so that if there's friends and colleagues that you think would also benefit from listening to this session, by all means, feel free to kind of share the link with everybody that you can think of. And join us hopefully again next week, where we're going to have Victoria Flores. And as a side note, this was before she said, I invited her to the class before she agreed to be a candidate for city council. Victoria is also running to be a counselor for Ward 6, which is kind of like the general hospital area, like Glencairn, Douglas Park, that kind of area. So she's really another outstanding person. So thanks all of you for joining us, and thanks again, Sabrina. You're amazing, like I knew you'd be, and have a great rest of your week, everybody.